We're in lesson 11, and we're storming the gates of hell. Kingdom conflict in the teachings of Jesus is really what we're the subject matter tonight. I want to spend some time looking at some teachings of Jesus that are covered in the Synoptic Gospels. I don't know if I'll have time in this series. I'd like to say something about John's teaching as well. John's teaching is interesting because he doesn't cover any demon possession, no exorcisms in John's account. And I've often wondered why that is. The only time that any kind of demon possession is mentioned in the Gospel of John is concerning Judas Iscariot. And that's very different, it seems, in its context and its manifestation than the exorcisms and the demon possession that Jesus deals with in the Synoptic Gospels. I know John's the last of the Gospels, and some people say it was probably written in the 60s AD. Some, even myself, might think that it could be later than that. But he's writing to a different generation, and I wonder whether the exorcisms, the demon possession that Jesus and Paul and maybe some of the other apostles deal with earlier in their ministry and the ministry of the church, I'm wondering whether those may have fizzled out some. And so it's not a major concern for John in his writing. His subject matter is a little different. That's just where I'm at with that, but you'll have to satisfy your own selves with your study and your take on that.
Rich, what do you think about that?
What do I think?
Yeah, do you think?
I think that they've kind of not so much of that going on by the time John writes, but I'm kind of persuaded John's Gospel's very late. Not as late as Revelation, but somewhere around there. So that's just where I'm at the moment. Ask me in a year's time. But yeah, I kind of think that. Before we storm the gates of hell, though, let me say something about another enemy that seems to be at times at the behest of the ruler of this world. And we've mentioned this enemy in our earlier classes, one of our couple of our opening classes. So it's nothing new. Nature, although created good, seems to have somehow gone awry. And the cosmic monsters, the hostile seas, which had to be contained in order for the present world to be established, Genesis 1:2, these same seas still surround the earth and threaten its order. In the apocalyptic literature of Jesus's time, this apocalyptic good versus evil, the kingdom of heaven and the dominion of darkness, and as one fights the other, there's this constant tension and to and fro. But that apocalyptic literature that rose up during that intertestamental period and was common and maybe at the forefront in Jesus's time, the awareness of this problem with nature seems to be elaborated upon to the point where angels have been given authority in a lot of Jewish writing of the time, since they were not part of God's design for creation. The authority, it seems, was given to certain angels, was their thinking, and I don't know where I'm at with this, but there's an angel over the wind, there's an angel over the thunderstorms, there's another angel over this aspect of nature, the sea, and that's where they were at with it all. So the Jews of Jesus's time, therefore, would see all natural disasters could be attributed to evil. And maybe that bears out a little bit with some of the things that happen that Jesus comments on, and certainly the people's worldview seems to come to the forefront during the Gospels. Demonic powers, could they possibly have an effect on nature? Well, I want to say something about that because I think there's a couple of several of Jesus' miracles that touch on that area. The most significant one would undoubtedly be Jesus' calming of the storm. They were crossing over the Sea of Galilee at that time, and I think this is the journey that they were taking, where eventually they get to the Gerasenes or the Gadarenes, and Jesus meets Legion. He's going into enemy territory. He's going to plant another beachhead, not necessarily in Judea, but he's letting Satan know that he's here and what he's about and what his ultimate intentions are in terms of dealing with the ruler of this world. It seems as though Jesus and even later the Apostle Paul accepted the apocalyptic view that demonic powers could adversely affect nature. When I was preparing this, I read that account that starts, I think it's in Acts 27, and finishes in 28. Do you remember when Paul was on his way to go and see Caesar? And what happened? He warned the captain of the ship that he was on. I think it was a grain ship, but there was like 275 passengers, which was quite common. I mean, these freighters would quite often take passengers for extra profit. They were supposed to winter. He said, "Do not sail. It'll be a bad decision if you sail from the island of," I think they were on Crete, and try to do this journey. The Mediterranean and the Aegean today, anyone will tell you, if you're a yachtsman, people like to go yachting on those islands. You do it at the wrong time of year, you do it at your own risk, because it is dangerous. Those storms can really whip up in a hurry. This one lasts for like 2 weeks, I think, and they almost classed it like a hurricane. They ended up having to get shot of the sails, the rigging and everything. They drug the anchors behind them in the hopes it might steady them in the storm. And Paul receives, seems like a vision that Jesus stands behind him, or the angel of the Lord, and tells him that they won't lose anybody as long as the people stay with the ship and do what Paul tells them to do. He's not the captain. He's a prisoner. And he's not the only prisoner on board. I think there's quite a number that are on their way to Rome. That account's kind of interesting to me because they did end up staying on the ship. They did end up doing what Paul told them to, take a little food because you're exhausted and we're going to be running aground soon. And they eventually hit a sandbar off the island of Malta, and they're all kept safe. But it just seems like Paul has an awareness that maybe there's other forces involved that are trying to stop him from getting to Rome. The Jews didn't want him to go to Rome. They tried to set up an ambush. They tried to get him to leave where he was in prison in Caesarea Philippi and take him to Jerusalem. They were going to ambush him and kill him. But God is one step ahead all the time, protecting his messenger. But Jesus, on this occasion, is with his disciples. He's in the boat. Jesus is in the head of the boat, sleeping, and or the stern, of the boat, and sleeping. And what happens to the disciples, of which probably half of them are pretty sturdy fishermen? They know that sea, Galilee. What happens to them? Yeah, a storm whips up on them. Remember the geography of this part of the world. The Sea of Galilee is, I think even up there, they're below sea level. It drops even more down to the deepest place on the planet, I think, that's not covered in sea. The Dead Sea, I think you're 600 foot below sea level. So mountains on, certainly very tall mountains on one side, and it's just it's an area that lends itself to storms building up and without very much notice at all. So it's a pretty hazardous place to be. But I'm not trying to explain away things, with just some kind of scientific meteorological answer. That's not what this is about. The storm's ferocity shocks these disciples, even the fishermen among them. They are scared witless, and so there's something about this account that makes me think back to Jonah. Do you remember Jonah's trying to go the wrong way and pretend he just can't read a map? He's on his way to Spain when he should be going to Nineveh. And what happens? He's asleep in the ship. I think it says in Jonah 1 verse 5, is it? What's going on outside while he's supposedly deep asleep? There's a major storm going on, and it's got these seafaring guys really worried. Yeah. They've tried getting hold of their own God to no effect, and he's not been able to do anything. And now they're willing to listen to anybody. And what does Jonah do? When someone wakes him up, what does he say?
Throw me overboard. Call on your God, man. Call on God. We're gonna be.
Yeah. Get that plank out. I need to walk it. You need to throw me overboard. And then God will sort the storm out. And what happened?
Exactly.
That's what happened. So, Jonah had to make his way to Nineveh via, and only ever once tried form of transport, as far as I'm aware. I think he's the only guy who's ever gone by fish. So go fish. That's Jonah's motto. Anyway, the storm has shocked the disciples, and they go and wake Jesus up. Like, how can you sleep during this? We're inundated. We're fixing to perish here. The boat's coming apart. Jesus gets up, and what does he do?
Why are you so afraid?
Well, first of all, I mean, he will say that in one of the accounts afterwards, but what does he do, first of all?
Doesn't have little faith.
Before that, before he gets after his disciples, he rebukes. It seems like he rebukes the sea and the wind. Certainly the wind, because he commanded the sea, peace, be still. Okay, be still. Mark 4:39. Mark's account's the one I'm using, and immediately, which is one of Mark's favourite words, immediately the elements submitted to the voice, and the sea calmed. Then Jesus chastised his disciples for lacking faith, even while they marveled at Jesus's power. And what were they marveling about here?
Control of nature.
Yeah, that he's got control over nature. I mean, who does that? Huh? That just doesn't happen, does it? So what is most significant about this passage is that the description of Jesus rebuking the wind in all three of the synoptic accounts sounds remarkably like other exorcism narratives in those Gospels. Indeed, the root meaning of the Greek word phimouo, which is translated be still or be quiet, actually means to muzzle. Does that sound familiar? To strangle, even. Okay? So isn't that what Jesus commanded the unclean spirit in Mark 1:25? I think we looked at that last week, and Luke 4:35. that this even is followed in all three synoptics with the account of Jesus casting out the army of demons from Legion, kind of strengthens my impression that what Jesus is doing here is muzzling the rebellious demon-controlled nature event, which I think the evil forces, spiritual forces, are trying to stop Jesus from getting to where he's going to, okay? Because they understand that he's trying to make a beachhead deep into Satan's territory. This is a place, I think if you remember last time I said that, how many soldiers is in a legion, a Roman legion? I think we said like 5,000 or 6,000. So what do you know that there must have been there at the Gerasene town, that part of the Decapolis? So there's like 10 cities on that eastern side there of Galilee. There was a big garrison there, a major fort garrison. And here's Jesus coming and setting up his banner on the beach there. The idea of rebuking the storm or the evil is more in line with the Old Testament idea of God making a footstool of his enemies, which is like what the kings of old used to do. They would literally, after defeating their foes, they get the enemy king that was defeated, and they would place their foot upon the neck of the enemy. Talk about humiliating. And then whatever would happen. That would seem to echo the language of rebuke that's used by the psalmist. Look at Psalm 104 quickly. Psalm 104. And I'm going to be reading verse 7, I think it is. Psalm 104. Well, let me read verse 5. You set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke, they fled. At the sound of your thunder, they took to flight. The mountains rose and the valleys sank down to the place that you appointed them. And you set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they may not again cover the earth. I don't know if he has in view there the flood of Noah's time. I kind of personally think this is more relating to Genesis 1:2. But you can see that it seems like the waters are a foe there. They're an adversary, and he's pushing them back and making them recede. And he's telling them, you can't go past that limit again. Stay in the deep. Stay at the margins I'm giving you, the boundaries I'm giving you. Yeah.
If that had been in creation, he tells them, you set a boundary that they cannot cross, never again will they cover the earth. And it did cover the earth.
Yeah, but I think he led it that time because he ordered it to. And then he told it at the end of the flood. Do you remember I said, how long was the flood? That's part of a year, wasn't it? But he, at some point after 200 and something days, he said, now recede, go back. It's like a definite order, a command.
It wasn't catastrophe there at that point.
Right.
At that point, it was God setting everything back. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The cataclysm had happened, and I often used to wonder, why was Noah on? Why did he keep him on that boat for so long afterwards? But
Well, I kind of wonder, why did he take it 100 years to build it? Can you imagine that what Noah took?
Yeah,
100 years.
100 years to build something. Well, the Italians, where we used to live, there's plenty of times that they took longer than that to build a cathedral or a tower. You know why the Tower of Pisa leans? Because they left it for about 100 years before another king finally came along and said, I think I want to finish this now. But that was quite normal. But no, taking 100 years to build a boat, he had a lot of preaching to do.
Oh, yeah.
So it was only a hobby.
Well, and if they didn't see rain before, you know, if they hadn't seen one.
Are you trying to send me down a rabbit hole here?
There you go. There you go.
Anyway, where did I get to? Oh, yes. So he rebukes the sea. And I don't think that the Gospels are merely being poetic when the writers say that. And I don't think Jesus was being poetic when he says he muzzled it. He's talking about literally what happened. And in an apocalyptic context, these terms should be taken literally. Behind this storm, Jesus definitely perceives some kind of demonic power strategizing to destroy him and his disciples before he can complete his ministry, whatever they understood his mission goals to be. By confronting the demonic, Jesus rebuked it, he strangled it, and he returned the sea back to the state that God created it to be in. Indeed, one stronger than the strong man who had hitherto controlled the seas had arrived and had bound up the sea. On a later occasion, in Matthew 14:22 and following, having just fed the 5,000 plus, Jesus sends his disciples away in a boat across the Sea of Galilee so that he might protect them from the crowds that wanted to take him by force and make him their king. And Jesus will dismiss the crowds once the disciples are on their way, and he'll go off up on the mountain to a desolate place to pray with his Father. And you know the account. The disciples are crossing the lake, and I think Matthew and Mark both say that the sea started to work against them. Not the same ferocity of storm that they'd experienced going over to sort Legion out. This time, though, it was stopping them getting anywhere, and they're in the middle of the sea there, the lake, and they're not getting anywhere. And they are actually starting to take water on. So it's building up in ferocity, and they're getting concerned again. And it says that during the fourth watch of the night, so what time of the night is it? Between 3 and 6, I would say. Yeah, good. So that's when I'm getting my REM sleep. I don't know about you. They are tired, don't you know? They are tired. They're trying and they're not prevailing against this storm. They're not getting anywhere, and they're taking on water, and that just makes it even harder to row. So what happens? Well, Jesus comes to them on the sea. But I think that as Jesus is walking on the sea, I think the waves part. I think he's walking on smooth, glassy water. And whatever's going on around him is at a distance. And the reason I think that is because if it's rough, if you've ever been in a sailboat on the sea and you've been in any kind of real waves, how far can you see? You can't see very far, like the next wave that's coming. That's about it. Yeah. And yet they could see Jesus, and he was a ways off, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Because two things happened. Matthew's account says that Peter stands up and says, "Lord, if it is your will, would you command me to come out there to you? Because I don't want to be here. It's safer to be with you." They thought it was a ghost at first, but that's probably because of the distance as well. So Jesus says to Peter, come to me. And so he does. And I don't like those silly Catholic pictures that make it look like Jesus is about one step from the boat. That's rubbish. The account in Matthew, he's a ways. And he allows Peter to come to him on the sea. Yes? And Peter only starts to sink when he takes his eyes off Jesus and looks at what's behind him. Okay, but where he is smooth. Is smooth. And he starts to sink then. And then the account says that Jesus rescues him, gets him back in the boat. And immediately, once they're in the boat, what happens to the storm? Mark says, Jesus again shows that he has control over nature, over this sea especially. I told you be still once. Now do you see how much control I have? And I think that's a powerful sign to Satan and the demonic forces, because they don't use that kind of deal again. Now, having said that, they do use it, don't they? But I'll say something more about that next week in our closing time together, because there's a day coming that has a significance where the forces of evil think they've won. And for a short while, it manifests as though they have won. But that's not the end of the story. Who was it who used to say that?
Wholeheartedly good.
Yeah, there you go. Tune in next week for the rest of the story. Okay. So it's interesting to me that Jesus doesn't rebuke that storm, but merely walks straight through it. It's just like maybe God with the parting of the Red Sea. I don't know, but I think it's all right to wonder about that and form some pictures in your mind, because it just shows how awesome God is. So the demonic forces are repelled a second time. Jesus' teaching about kingdom conflict in the Synoptics. In light of all we've studied in this series, I want to demonstrate that his teachings were not first and foremost about high ethical ideals or profound religious insights, though frequently his teachings are about exactly that. Okay, but primarily Jesus's teachings are fundamentally about what Jesus is about, and that is engaging in mortal combat with the enemy of all that is good, all that is godly, and all that is true. In Jesus's teachings, we find many, many valuable insights into the nature of the war that ravages the earth even today. And it is these insights that can, and I believe they should, influence our understanding of the problem of evil. We need to be more of an army of God. You know, we sing songs like Onward Christian Soldiers and the battle, what's that song that we sing? The battle belongs to the Lord. You know, but I don't know as we really engage those songs the way they're meant to be engaged. We don't see ourselves enough as soldiers, but we are fighting his war. It's still going on. The kingdom is still trying to expand, isn't it? It's still trying to seize new lands, new areas of Lubbock, maybe new areas of your street. You know, it's a war. And the war is being fought over people's souls. That's ultimately what we're talking about here. Ravaged. You know? And I think back in the 60s and 70s, some of our missionary people and some of our preachers did a good job of getting that message across to us. But a generation later, we kind of need someone to bring us back to that. Yeah? And we need to sing those songs again like we mean it, instead of sort of taking a pacifistic view and just sort of pretending it's someone else's concern. No. We're the ones that are supposed to stand firm wearing that armor. Yes? And so it's definitely a call for us, I think. So let's start in Matthew 16:13, another passage that you're very familiar with. What's going on in Matthew 16? Jesus is asking his disciples what the people are saying about him. Yeah. Who do the people that you've been out on your little commission I gave you? Who do the people say that I am? And what were some of the responses?
John
John the Baptist coming back.
Man, it sounds like you're talking in tongues. Okay, I got all that. But what did Peter say? Because Jesus said, hold on a minute, what are you guys? Because you know you use that term, don't you? What are you guys? Who do you guys say that I am? Yeah, Peter is the man who says, yeah, you are the Son of the living God. And what's Jesus' reply to Peter?
Right.
Tick.
Bless you.
Bless you. But before that, what else does he say?
Flesh and blood.
Who revealed it to you? Did Pontius Pilate or the Pharisees? No.
Revealed by God.
The Father.
The Father.
Yeah, the Father revealed that to you. What's the significance of
And he's
that?
gonna make him the Pope.
What version are you reading there? Is that the Vatican Bible?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah,
That was good.
flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. In other words, you didn't get that answer, Peter, by polling the people. You didn't consult Pew Research or Rasmussen or whoever they had there in their day. No, it was only God that could have revealed that to you. So whatever you've picked up about my ministry, Peter, you've picked it up from God. You recognize who this is that's before you.
Jesus was a real fact checker.
Yeah, he was. No Snopes and Snopus in Roman times. It's interesting to me that only a few minutes later, though, just a few verses in your text, what happens? Get behind me, Satan. And I don't think you said it like that either. Jesus is seen rebuking Peter, almost as though he's in league with the adversary, Satan, for wanting to thwart the kingdom plan to have Jesus crucified and resurrected. It would seem that everything that opposes God's will, in Jesus' opinion, derives from the evil one. Let me say that again because it's really important. Everything that opposes God's will for the kingdom, okay, in Jesus' opinion, derives from the evil one. That ought to make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, especially if you're an elder. To Jesus, then, setting one's mind on human things is directly contrary to setting one's mind on divine things, things that come from above. So Jesus gave his disciples an important teaching based upon Peter's confession. Let's read verse 18 and 19 together. Okay. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, or hell, as some translations say, Hades is a better translation, shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you will have bound on earth shall have been bound in heaven. Is the better translation of the verb tenses there. I know that's not what your version says. And whatever you will have loosed on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Okay. What does he mean? What is the meaning of this teaching? Well, it would seem that in the context of the apocalyptic nature of his narrative again, that Jesus isn't referring merely to the Greek context of Hades, being the realm of darkness and of death, but rather he's referring to the whole satanic kingdom when he uses that term. Okay. Secondly, when he says the gates of Hades, that seems to be a metaphorical reference to the fortified walls of Satan's kingdom. Yes? Because what does every castle have? Gates. But what's the gate's purpose? Is it to keep the people in, or is it to keep the enemy out? So what is their purpose? Is it attacking or defensive? Defensive. Yeah. They are closed to keep opposing forces out. What Jesus is saying, I believe, is that these gates need to be overcome. It may be that Jesus is referring to the center of Satan's power by referring to it as the gates. And the reason I think that is because in John's gospel, what is one of the things that Jesus says, I am?
The door.
Yeah, the gate, the door of the gate. I think that's in John 10, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's significant. Yeah, because it's a defensive analogy he gives again, the sheep that are kept in the pen at night, and he guards the gate. Yes, he is the gate.
He lays his body across it.
Yeah, yeah. For it was at the gates of the city also. What's the other significance in ancient times, in some of our accounts of the Old Testament? What other significance did the gates of the city have during the day?
The elders sat there.
Good. The elders sat there. What did they do? Drink coffee? Talk about the weather?
Well, they adjudicated things.
Yeah, they held council there, didn't they? In the gates of the city. So that's kind of significant as well, I think.
They didn't lock them in the daytime, did they?
Not unless the enemy's outside fixing an attack. No, they would normally be open, yes, but guarded. But yeah, so Jesus says that these gates will not be able to prevail against the church. And that's actually a good translation. It's a better translation of the verb than the NIV uses, the Greek verb katisko, since the gates are defensive structures designed to keep enemy forces out. Remember the gates, Jesus is portraying the church as being on the offensive, and Satan's kingdom here is very much on the defensive, yes? It would seem to me, and that's based on this wonderful acknowledgement, this confession of who Jesus is. Yes.
And a famous friend of mine from history,
Mm-hmm.
and he's one of my favorites is just a second, it'll come to me.
Mm.
Oh, George Patton. George Patton said that castle walls and stuff were folly,
Yeah.
because you need to be outside attacking, not hiding back in, because that's where you lose.
Yeah.
In other words, you go out and you get on the offensive,
Uh-huh.
and that's what that's what you were doing all the way from Abraham, and
Mm-hmm.
every one of them had to get out of their comfort zone and fight.
Right. Take it to the breach those walls.
That's right.
Yeah. Often the walls would be easier to breach than the gates, but eventually they come down.
They all come down.
They all come down. Jesus says that he's going to build the church on the rock of his divinity, which is the confession that he is the Son of the living God. And the way that this church is going to be built will be by bashing down the gates of Satan's fortress. That's kind of neat, isn't it? He's going to build his church by storming those gates, by laying siege to Satan's kingdom. And he says we can do it. We can do it with the help of the Spirit. Yes.
Doesn't it say in Philippians that on the cross, Christ disabled powers,
Colossians.
principalities?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to look at that next week.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I was actually thinking of another scripture before that I've bounced out of my head now for a moment. In other words, the church is to be involved in the very same work of fighting Satan that Jesus himself is involved in throughout his ministry. in the Gospels. Maybe when Jesus refers to binding and loosing abilities in verse 18 and 19 there, he's conferring upon his apostles what he is what he's actually referring to is the abilities they will have to bind the demons, the demonic. And so loose would be to free the captives. And there's still examples of that going on, isn't there? Do you remember at the beginning of Paul's first journey? They stop in Cyprus, and he's going to see the proconsul, the Roman leader there, because he's a believer, okay? And he wants to convert him. But the magician, the consul's magician, Elymas, I think that's what that word means, what does he do? Let's go to Acts 13, verse 8 quickly. Acts 13. He stands in opposition very much to Paul. And
the sorcerer.
yeah, but Saul, as he was then, who was also called Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, looked intently at Elymas and said, "You son of the... You son of a gun," in the Texas version, the son of the devil. Wow. "You enemy of all righteousness, full of all deceit and villainy." Who does it sound like? Sound like he's talking about Satan, doesn't he? "Will you not stop making crooked the straight paths of the Lord? And now behold, the hand of the Lord is upon you, and you will be blind and unable to see the sun for a time." And what happened to him? Immediately, mist and darkness fell upon him. He went about seeking people to lead him by the hand. Then the proconsul believed. So there's a definite confrontation there, and he's not in two minds about what he's facing, is he? He attributes this guy as a member of Satan's army. Okay, so that seems quite clear. I want to spend some time, I kind of touched on this a couple of lessons ago, but I want to go back to the Lord's Prayer because I think this is a significant teaching as well. If you had a look at this prayer of Jesus from the viewpoint of the purpose of his ministry on earth, in other words, that apocalyptic stance, taking the fight to Satan, to win back the dominion of darkness and transfer it back into the power of the kingdom of heaven. It seems pretty clear to me that there's some awesome things start to become evident when you take the right focus on this prayer. That this is introduced to the disciples as a model prayer. It should also focus us on what we really need to be praying for contextually today as Jesus' disciples.
Where is it?
Let's go to Matthew's account. So that would be Matthew 6. Matthew 6, where does it start? Verse 10, 9 and 10. Verse 9 and 10, the first two stanzas of the prayer. I think the real context is meant to focus his disciples and us to beseech God, which is really what this kind of language means. We don't command God, but we're beseeching him. We're pleading with God, please do this. So we're beseeching God for the fulfillment of everything that Christ's ministry and the apostles' ministry is about. Well, what is that? Is it not to bring glory, to glorify the Father as they establish the rule and the will of God on earth as it is in heaven? Yeah. Notice, however, that such a prayer request assumes the will of God is not being carried out uniformly in this present world. And I don't believe it is any more today than it was back when Jesus prayed this prayer for his disciples. If Jesus makes a major object of his prayer, the petition that God come to rule as king, then this naturally means that in some sense, according to Jesus at least, God is not fully ruling as king on earth. Because who's the God of this world? Satan.
And he's still out there on the prowl.
Yeah, he is. Notice, however, this prayer then is a prayer for radical change. And that change involves moving from a world in which the Father's name is not honored and his will is not being done and his rule is not fully established into a world, changed into a world which these things are as they should be. And I think that's what Jesus is basically saying in those opening two stanzas. Your name should be hallowed on earth as it is in heaven. And we want it that way. But do we pray that prayer? Thinking like that? We want your name to be hallowed and glorified as it should be here on earth. Give us the means for that to happen. Yeah. In a warfare context, the need to secure tomorrow's physical needs, in a later stanza, to continue the fight is important, isn't it? In any war, what's one of the biggest things? I mean, this was Hitler's undoing. What did Hitler do in Russia that caused him to lose the war?
They were unprepared.
He did the same thing Napoleon did. He overextended his supply lines. And his men got cold. They couldn't get replacement boots and clothing and food and whatever they needed because he overextended his supply lines. Yeah. And so when we pray for, our needs to be taken care of, give us this day our daily bread. I wonder whether there's not a context in terms of, Lord, continue to supply the needs we have in order to fight Satan. Okay? Whatever those needs are. Physical needs and spiritual strengthening. And so Jesus' prayer teaches the disciples where to place that trust in the Father. And that's exactly who Jesus relied on, isn't it? For his physical needs during his ministry. Did Jesus tow around carts full of food and provisions?
He didn't need to.
He had one or two really good women who were supporting his ministry, didn't he? He had a good few of them, actually. But he didn't rely on those things. He trusted the Father to provide them. So when he sends out the disciples and then later the 70 or 72 on a limited commission, what did he tell them to take with them? Nothing. Except the clothes on your back and your coat and your sandals so you can shake the dust off when they don't believe you. Yeah, rely on the people. Okay. As missionaries, we were taught to do that. Yeah, to trust God. Because the church will never give you enough money to go on the mission. Because a lot of churches, believe it or not, think that missionaries are supposed to be poor. I'm having a joke with you, because that's not what we do here at Greenlawn, is it? So anyway, another part of this this prayer, the last stanza of the prayer, is also of much interest to me. Commonly, it's translated as beseeching God not to lead us into temptation. But that's a fallacy, isn't it? That's an oxymoron. Does God lead anyone to temptation? No, he doesn't. And the word pierasmos there in the Greek is better translated trials. Okay, it's much better. It can mean temptation, but that doesn't fit the context here because of who it's concerning. Okay, because James 1 says he can't be tempted by evil, and he tempts no one with evil. Okay, so it can't be that that's the best translation there. But God, the word trial speaks not of moral temptation then, but rather of hardship, doesn't it? Trials, persecutions, wake up, whoever that is. That's what my alarm does in the morning. Trouble is, I've learned how to turn it off without waking up. Anyway, yeah. trials, persecutions, hardships. So what Jesus is saying is this: beseech my Father that he will be able to protect you from the coming trials and the coming hardships associated with our ministry of attacking Satan's strongholds and expanding God's kingdom rule. And that becomes ultimately clear from the last line of the prayer when Jesus says that we should also urge the Father to provide divine deliverance from the evil one. To me, that makes the Lord's Prayer a whole different prayer. What about you? Jesus knows only too well that carrying out this kind of kingdom work will elicit a response from Satan and his demonic army. There's going to be a retaliation. And the kingdom of heaven, I haven't really got time to do this. I'm going to start with this next verse. I'm going to share with you some thoughts on Matthew 11:12, which concerns, let me just read it and you can think on it before next time if you have any thoughts. From the days of John the Baptist till now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and violent ones take it by force. Have a think about that between now and next time. It's probably one of the most difficult sayings of Jesus, but I've got a kind of a take on it that fits what we're studying. And we'll close it out next time. We'll look at the crucifixion. All right, any questions? Clear as mud.